The winter storm battered the mountains as the Van der Linde gang struggled to survive. Snow buried their camp, supplies were low, and tempers were wearing thin. But the greatest danger was not the cold. It was the growing fracture within the gang itself. Dutch Van der Linde had changed, and Arthur Morgan noticed it first. Dutch spent more time whispering with Micah Bell, pacing around camp at night, speaking less about freedom and more about survival and power. The man who once spoke about loyalty and family now stared at his own people like they were problems, waiting to be solved. One freezing night, Dutch called everyone to the campfire. The gang gathered slowly. Arthur, John Marston, Sadie Adler, Charles Smith, Hosea Matthews, Sean McGuire, Lenny Summers, Susan Grimshaw, Bill Williamson, Javier Escuella, and Micah Bell. Dutch stood tall, his eyes sharp and restless. He began speaking about weakness in the gang, saying there were too many doubts and too many voices questioning him. Arthur challenged him, asking what he was really trying to say. Dutch answered coldly that some members were holding the gang back and that survival required strength above loyalty. Micah watched with a smug grin while Hosea tried to calm the situation, warning Dutch he was losing sight of what they once stood for. The tension broke when Javier slowly stepped beside Dutch. Bill Williamson joined him, standing firmly with Micah. Arthur looked around and saw that John, Sadie, Charles, Sean, Hosea, Lenny, and Grimshaw had moved to his side. Arthur told Dutch this wasn't what they had built together, but Dutch simply replied that maybe it was time for those who disagreed with him to leave. That night, the gang split apart, Arthur leading his loyalists into the snow while Dutch remained behind with his followers. In the weeks that followed, the wilderness became a battlefield. Dutch's faction hunted Arthur's group through forests and valleys. The first clash came at an abandoned lumber yard when Micah and Bill launched a surprise attack. Bullets tore through the wooden buildings while snow flew into the air from the gunfire. Sean McGuire laughed wildly as he returned fire, shouting jokes even in the middle of the fight. But suddenly a rifle cracked from the tree line. Sean's laughter stopped as he collapsed into the snow with a bullet through his chest. Arthur dragged him behind cover, but Sean only muttered weakly that it had been one hell of a party before he died. The loss hit Arthur's group hard, yet the fighting continued. Weeks later, another ambush struck in a rocky valley when Javier and Bill attacked again. During the gunfight, Lenny Summers ran across open ground to help Charles. Bill fired, and the bullet struck Lenny in the side. He collapsed into the dust as Arthur rushed to him. Arthur tried desperately to stop the bleeding, but Lenny knew the truth. With a faint smile, he whispered that he guessed he wasn't outrunning fate before dying in Arthur's arms. Despite the losses, the Loyalists pushed forward, determined not to let Dutch destroy everything they once believed in. Eventually, Arthur learned that Dutch had taken control of an abandoned mining town high in the mountains. Arthur knew it was a trap, but they could not keep running forever. Arthur, John, Sadie, Charles, Hosea, and Grimshaw rode into the ghost town at dawn. At first, the streets were silent, but then gunfire erupted from every rooftop and window. Micah's gang attacked from all sides while Bill charged through the streets, and Javier guarded the alleys. The battle was brutal. Charles fought like a warrior and Sadie like a storm, cutting through Dutch's men with relentless fury. In the middle of the chaos, Grimshaw stepped into the open to fire at Micah. A rifle cracked and Javier's bullet struck her in the chest. She collapsed instantly. Arthur realized they were being surrounded and that Dutch had planned the entire fight to wipe them out. Knowing someone had to buy time, Arthur made his final decision. He shouted for John to take the others and escape. John refused at first, but Arthur reminded him that Abigail and Jack needed him alive. Arthur then ran toward the mine entrance, throwing lanterns and blasting the wooden supports with his revolver. Flames erupted through the tunnels as the mine began collapsing, forcing Dutch's men to scatter in panic. The diversion worked. John, Sadie, Charles, and Hosea escaped into the forest while Arthur stayed behind. Through the smoke emerged Dutch and Micah. Micah fired first, the bullet tearing into Arthur's side. Still standing, Arthur tackled Micah and forced him back before turning his revolver toward Dutch. The two men stared at each other for a long moment. Arthur weakly told him that he used to believe in something. Dutch replied that he still did. Arthur fired, grazing Dutch's shoulder. and the burning mine collapsed further. Dutch and Micah fled into the mountains as the fire consumed the town. Arthur staggered out of the ruins and collapsed on a snowy hillside. Blood poured from his wound as his strength faded. Far below, he could see riders escaping into the forest. John, Sadie, Charles, and Hosea. They had made it out alive. Arthur smiled faintly, whispering that it was enough. Snow began to fall softly as Arthur Morgan slowly bled out beneath the gray winter sky. John returned to the scene and kneeled down, put his head to Arthur's grave and whispered, "I'll make it right.